AEW Dynamite for March 23rd, as soon as they come on the air, like Mussolini with his dog Larry. Did you see that Larry was embroidered or emblazoned on Punk's warm-up jacket?
I actually didn't notice that, no.
You didn't notice that?
I didn't.
You thought Punk's real name was Larry?
I guess I just didn't pay attention to the placement of Larry, however it was placed.
Larry's a fine little puppy. But anyway, we had CM Punk versus Dax Harwood in a singles match. I wrote wrestling, ! Because it was so surprising. In a vacuum, if you didn't know anything else about the wrestling industry, what promotion was on top, what promotion was big or small, who was where, and you just watched this match, and then you turned and you watched any WWE program pretty much just about, even the good matches they have, you would think that this AEW was the major league promotion. Because even when the WWE lets the guys that they have that can go have a good match, it doesn't look, the people aren't into it as much because the WWE fans have been taught that matches are the meaningless breaks in between entrances and Zoom calls. This had two quality professionals, experienced veterans, one guy a major name. The other guy should be a major name, but the booking of him has been rotten. The people were into it. You had announcers that sounded like, that every once in a while they were calling a wrestling match, unlike on the other program. Just in a vacuum, just watch this match and watch anything from the WWF, and you would think AEW is the major league. And then you would watch another segment of AEW and go, what the fuck was I just thinking? Every time they make a good impression, they have to put shit on the same show that will negate that. So let's talk about the positive first. Obviously, again, Punk and Dax. I mean, I don't even need to recap the match. It was everything you would expect. Dax works like a heel. Punk had the fucking people behind him as a babyface. Everything made sense. It looked sharp and snug. It was a contest. There was no ridiculous tumbling. And the people got into it the more that they took them on the ride. If they did do a big move, it was sold. I mean, at the start, Punk shined a little. Then Dax got a little heat. Then there was the comeback. The big 1-2 in the ring. The beautiful superplex. Dax, after they fought for the superplex, instead of just standing up there or climbing up and gingerly assisting each other on the top rope to do a big move that everybody was cooperating on, they fight for the position on the top, block a couple of things, and finally Dax crotches Punk and then gives him a big superplex off the top. They both sell it. And then Dax hits a diving headbutt, gets a 2 count, just barely. Dax goes for a suplex. Punk reverses it. Both of them go over the top rope. Great bump. And they're selling. And that's what brings old Cash Wheeler down to ringside. He's starting to get concerned. Punk hit that crossbody off the top, got a 2 count, and goes into the Anaconda Vice. Dax pulled his hair to break the hold. Imagine that, a heel cheating to break a submission hold. Dax still sent a little nod to the exiled Tully Blanchard. He did the slingshot power bomb, 2 count. And the people are starting to chant, this is awesome. And they were right for once. It wasn't just meaningless children's tumbling. It was 2 good pro wrestlers. Punk goes for the GTS. Dax blocks it into the sharpshooter. Punk rolls through into the Anaconda Vice, and Dax has to tap. Great match. I can't fault anybody involved in the match. The fault of anything, if FTR had been booked properly as a dominant heel tag team, Then when you split them up into singles, it would have more impact, and it would allow the single star that beats one of the top heel tag guys to shine a little brighter because they'd be over more. But unfortunately, as we know, since FTR was not gifted with the same privilege that not only the major stars, but also the fucking worms of the roster that have their EVP titles and their indie darling status, they were all given the privilege to do whatever the fuck they wanted in their booking. FTR was following the rules and were buried when they came in and have never gotten a chance. So now, and actually, honestly, I think it's too late at this point. You see because the AEW fans have no idea what it takes to be an accomplished professional wrestler. They've seen, and most of the AEW fans, there are some wrestling fans in that group, but they've fallen in love with the fucking kids cosplay crowd, and they just want to see crash and burn bullshit for no reason. And that has kept a lot of the AEW fans from being able to recognize what FTR can do, because they don't know how to look at a good match. They just look at chaos. But if a focused booker that could actually put a roster together that didn't look like a mixture of Victorian antiques and shit from the Sharper Image because it's all over the page, had put something together for FTR with a plan from the start, they would be the most over tag team in the company right now. Because they wouldn't be doing the same goddamn shit every week like the Cucamonga Kids and the rest of their ilk. But anyway, so the only problem I found was that it's just another way to penalize Dax, because everybody wants to work with Dax or Cash in singles because they're the best workers on the roster. So to have a great match and get a good win, you go to FTR. They just never had the opportunity to get over strong before they started getting the shit kicked out of them, because the people in charge of the company didn't know how to book wrestlers. They only know how to book gymnasts and chaos. What'd you think of that match?
Oh, I love that match. It was fantastic. Just to touch on what you just said, I would actually like to see a Cash Wheeler singles match. I don't know if we've ever actually seen one. We've seen a few with Dax. I don't know if we've seen one with Cash. So
we probably will after they beat Dax a few more times, and we'll see Cash doing some jobs also.
This match was excellent, and it was made even better by the fact that they had a super hot crowd. And I thought that was part of the story for me watching it. Here were two guys working a classic wrestling match. A wrestling match that would have worked 20 years ago, 30 years ago. A wrestling match that works today. And the crowd was eating it up, and they were so into it, and they were so loud, and they didn't need to do those flips and everything. If the Young Bucks had opened the show, and I'm not even trying to pick on them, but using them as an example, they would have just gone out there and burned out the crowd with nonstop stuff. And if the crowd went with it, they couldn't have possibly reacted as loud as they did to the stuff in the Punk match.
No.
And they didn't need to do any of that. It says something about what still works. And I think that was one of my big takeaways. And it's the most frustrating thing to me. Tony Khan sits at a table with a headset and a monitor in front of him. And he's watching all of this. And he cares more about all this than any of us do. And he saw the Punk MJF program. And before that, the little brief things we got with, let's say, Punk and Kingston, MJF and Pillman Jr., MJF and Darby. And now Punk is doing this match with Dax. We'll see where this goes with Punk. He wants the belt. That's interesting. MJF has the thing with Wardlow. We'll talk about that later. They called back to Punk. But after seeing all that, a feud that everyone has talked about how good it is. It's not just people like us who are out of touch and hate anything, under the age of 25 or whatever the claim is. Everyone talked about how good it was, the matches, the feud, the logic, the promos, everything. Yet he still lets this other stuff get on the show, on the same show with stuff like this. A serious match that worked, that set a great tone, and then the tone changes. And I know it's kind of like this throw everything against the wall. It's the wrestling circus. We have the elephants. In a little while, we're going to have the clowns, and then we'll have this. But when something works so well, and it sets the tone so well, and it keeps working, every Punk segment, every MJF segment, some other guys are hit or miss, but there are at least 2 guys that are doing it. Why can't the whole show look like this? It works. Even their fans like it. But instead,
you missed one. Bryan Danielson.
Well, I didn't use Bryan Danielson because they have completely cooled him off to me, and I was as high on him as anyone.
That's the point I was making. You're talking sense there, Brian. You're saying sensible things, but you're not dealing with sensible people. As we will talk about here in just a few minutes, this company had the absolute best in-ring heel in professional wrestling and have just figured out a way to fuck that up. So you can't mean to tell me that you think just because Tony is seeing shit going on in front of him that he's going to fucking realize what he's seeing in front of him. Because no, he can't. Because he's like the guy that wants to put the fucking antique Victorian vase next to the goddamn electronic fucking potato peeler from Sharper Image. He does it. He collects things. He's a collector that picks shit up without any rhyme or reason to how it's going to go together in his collection. He acquires things. He can't focus on getting his previous acquisition in place before he acquires something else, and then he just can't focus. I think that's what it comes down to. He thinks that everybody has a mind that is working at 500 miles an hour, bouncing off the walls, and needs sedation like he does. And he thinks that everybody just wants to see every goddamn thing that they've ever seen before. It's like putting all the animals at the zoo in the same cage. Look at that. Where do you ever see that? You don't. For good fucking reason. Half of them are about to get eaten. It's just a mess. And the individual talents that are given some type of fucking leeway to do their own shit most often shine through, except when it's the comedy half of the program. Anyway, and you brought this match, go ahead.
And you brought up the commentary. I just want to say one other thing, because I've been really, really negative on Shivani being on commentary right now. I just don't think he adds anything. He's just saying things that are, I'm so excited to be here. He should be the interviewer. That should be his full-time role. He's fine in it. The fans love him in it. I think if Shivani was off commentary and just doing interviews, it would help a lot. Now, you still need someone. I'm not a fan of a 3-man booth, but you definitely need someone to buffer between JR and Excalibur. But I don't think it should be Shivani. He's adding nothing to that role. He adds something to the interview role.
Well, I agree with you there. I wish the buffer between Jim Ross and Excrement would be a large Ford pickup truck that Jim Ross was driving and Excrement was a jaywalker.